So, what I was thinking of for right now is to do a practice on appreciative joy. We've done this before, but it's been quite a while. There's a um, there are four principles in yoga philosophy, and one of them is to be joyful for other people's good fortune. And also, we could be joyful for our own good fortune. And so, I thought maybe we could do a relaxation and kind of weave in an inquiry around that or a noticing around that. So, however you want to arrange your body, you could sit, lie down. It's always so nice to lie down. Get yourself really settled and comfortable. I was just out for a walk at the ocean, so I have that kind of freshness with me right now and that appreciation of the beauty of where I live, of the opportunity and the privilege to be able to walk at the ocean. It's only about a 15-minute drive from here to a really nice walking beach. And I made a commitment to myself when I moved here 5 years ago that I would walk at the ocean every week. And I'm sure I have averaged every week. A couple times I've missed for a couple of weeks, but other times I go more often. So bring to mind something in your life that you feel really happy and grateful for. It could be a person, a place, and bring that to mind. And notice how it comes in as memory often. There are images of it, words perhaps. And there are tactile sensations depending on what it is that you're bringing forward. For me on the walk, it was a very familiar smell of the ocean. At low tide, the seaweed and the kelp beds are exposed a bit. There's that kind of pungent smell that's just the ocean. So we might have some sensory memories that come along with whatever it is that we're looking at as well. And our minds are biased towards danger. Our minds are biased towards noticing negative. So we're not entertaining that right now. This practice is about noticing what we appreciate. So we're not arguing with the mind in terms of, no, that's not right or anything like that. We're just not paying attention. If the mind is bringing up obstacles to looking at what we appreciate, just kind of reassure ourselves that we don't need to see all sides of the question right now. In this practice, we're just bringing forward something that we feel appreciation for. It could be a person, it could be nature, it could be anything, whatever comes to mind. And then kind of soak it in. Really notice what images are there. What's the feeling in your body as you remember that? It might be the touch of fresh air on your skin or someone's touch. The warmth of your favorite dog or anything like that. Just really soak in that experience of sensory perceptions around that, the person, the place, the animal, whatever it is. And we'll come back to the practice. We'll weave it through as we relax, pay attention to our body, our breath. And anytime that you notice that your mind is getting distracted, especially by negative thoughts, just stop for a moment and let yourself refocus on this. Let yourself really notice. There are some things in my life that I really appreciate, where I really feel joy, where I feel excited. I get to see them or do that thing or go that place. And that's a useful occupation for the mind, certainly more useful than harboring all of the negative thoughts. We're not trying to destroy the negative thoughts or get rid of them. We're just not paying attention to them right now. This is the time for a positive focus. We're just going to notice what we really appreciate. So take another minute or so to soak that in. And then tune in now to how your body is feeling at the moment. Our bodies are complicated for many reasons, one of which is that we don't generally have an overall good feeling in every place in the body. Even if we overall have a kind of a happy energy going on, there might be some part of our body that hurts. Very, very often we have parts of our body that we don't like. Might not like our stomach or our nose or all kinds of opinions we have about our bodies, about how they look and about how they feel. So just to keep in mind that right now we're not entertaining negative thoughts. We might notice them. We're not trying to shove them away, but we're not giving them airspace. And sit with that for a bit. Notice what comes up when you pay attention to your body, how it feels, the sensations in your body. And let your attention be drawn to the least appreciated part of your body. If it's possible, put your hand right on that part and just give it a bit of attention for a moment. We don't have to like it necessarily. Just notice it. Turn your attention towards it in a positive or at least a neutral kind of a way. And then bring and then bring your attention to the top of your head and your forehead, your eyebrows. And notice if you could soften the forehead and eyebrows a bit. And noticing that right behind the forehead, there's our thoughts, our brain. And for many of us, our experience with our brain isn't optimal. We might have a lot of compulsion in the mind. We could have trauma and perhaps PTSD, some kinds of super hyper vigilant, anxiety, fearful kind of patterns in the mind. So the mind isn't necessarily our friend. It can feel that way anyway. This is where all of these judgmental thoughts come up, where we're kind of stuck ruminating about something that happened or that might happen. So notice for a moment the actual brain tissue. We have brains, they weigh, I don't know, 2 or 3 pounds, I think. We've seen slides of them or pictures of them. We have a fair idea of the actual shape of the brain. We know that some parts of the brain have different functions. The prefrontal cortex is more of an executive function, and it was developed much later than the primitive brain. When we've been hurt, often the primitive brain kind of takes over, and we have a lot of fear, a lot of coping mechanisms that might be triggered by fight, flight, freeze. So, in some sense, we could really be kind of angry at the brain. It's really not working very well. And then as we get older, it gets worse generally. So, just notice for a moment all of the thoughts that you might have about your actual brain, the functioning of your brain, the brain tissue, the different parts of the brain. The effect of trauma on the development in our brain. And let yourself entertain for a moment what might have been, what your brain might have been like, what your development might have been like if you'd felt protected and safe and encouraged as you were growing up. Or if you hadn't had these traumatic experiences later in life either, what might a well functioning brain be like? And how would that be different from yours? And there might be sadness, a sense of lost possibilities, might be a sense of betrayal or hopelessness that it will never get better. There could be all kinds of different things coming up. We're just going to give ourselves a chance to notice that. And then let that come to a close. There might be something that you wanted to look at again later. If so, you could make a note of that or a mental note. But let's take this stepped back perspective again. We're witnessing our experience, our thoughts about our experience. And in this particular case, our brain, which isn't exactly the same as our mind and our thoughts, but they're definitely very connected. And notice if you feel that what's happening in your brain is understandable. If there's any sense that your brain is developing the way it did because it's out to get you or it hates you or something like that, notice if there's anything like that going on. Even if you're not happy with how it's functioning, is there a sense of intentionality that your brain is trying to make things hard for you? There's no right or wrong way to do this. If there is that sense, then look at how it is that you know that. That would be coming up in words or images, some kind of energy that has words or images attached to it, maybe. And if that's not the case, just notice if there's some kind of a neutral or even positive regard. Wow, with all the conditions that my brain has been through, it's still pretty functional. It functions really well in some areas. In some areas, I struggle. But given the circumstances, I can appreciate these things about my brain. And give yourself some time and see what comes forward. And as you're doing that, notice your body, notice your breath. We're just kind of sitting back and seeing what there is to see here. And something that might come up, it does for me at times, is how I've put a lot of pressure on the brain. I haven't given it good nutrition always. Sometimes I eat too much sugar. I get brain fog. Just notice what comes up around how you've cared for your brain. And most of those things are not intentional either. Sometimes I don't get enough sleep. And sometimes when that happens, it's because there's some kind of underlying anxiety. Maybe the brain has gotten overstimulated and I'm trying to soothe it with something in order to get calm enough to sleep. And people with PTSD generally have a lot of trouble sleeping. It's very common, at least until a certain amount of healing has happened. Just notice some of these patterns and some of the things that have happened with the brain. Some of them are at the hands of other people, for sure. Our parents, and we, if we're parents, didn't know, didn't understand even how brain development happened. It's only been since the 70s that researchers even discovered that brains develop after childhood. And now we know that no matter what's going on with our brain, we can develop new neural pathways. It can become much healthier. And we know a lot of the tools to do that. And one of them is to focus on the positive, which we were just doing at the beginning of this practice. And on not giving too much airtime to the negative. And let's apply this same witnessing to the thoughts in the mind, the thought stream. So it definitely has a connection with the brain. Our thoughts just kind of generate through past associations primarily. If I talk about a campfire at the beach, you might have an image from a magazine you've seen. You might have an image of personal experience when you've had a campfire on the beach, how old you were, what it felt like. A lot of our thoughts are generated from our associations, from past memories, past experiences. So, keeping this perspective again, not getting right into the content, is it possible that the thoughts that are generated in our mind that are negative or judgmental aren't true? That they're in our minds because of past experience? We've all had experiences of not feeling loved or valued or seen, of feeling isolated, not protected. And our brain, our nervous system, our primitive brain primarily makes a valiant attempt to keep us safe. And one of the ways that it does that is by generating fear, negative thoughts, warnings, this feeling of vigilance. Let's sit with that for a moment. Sometimes we might have a feeling that our brain or our mind is torturing us or sabotaging us with certain kinds of thoughts. And let's sit and look and see what that feels like to entertain that thought. My mind is my enemy, and I know that because of the kinds of thoughts that are in there. And look to see if that's true, if there's some other explanation. For anyone who has been shamed or hurt in that way, there can be a preemptive shaming that happens. We often take on that job of being judgmental and controlling. And perhaps that's the reason why those kinds of thoughts are in the mind. It's not because the mind knows something horrible about us. There are all kinds of reasons why we have negative thoughts. Take a few deep breaths. Give yourself a few minutes to really sit with this whole exploration about the brain, the mind, the thoughts. And then let's switch to appreciating the brain and the mind, the thoughts. In that very same location, the very same mechanism that creates judgmental thoughts also is a space where wonderful thoughts come in, where we have creative insights. We have appreciation. we see a beautiful sunset. It's the same hardware with a different program running. So let's let go of all of the negative, all of the patterns that cause suffering or that aren't very helpful. And right now, focus again on things that are positive about the brain and your mind. What is here to appreciate? There's a practice of putting a period on the end of a sentence that might be helpful. Sometimes when we have a thought about, well, I appreciate that I have a reasonable, good memory, there could be that little voice that comes in and goes, well, yeah, but it's not like it used to be. And what happens in the future? And so if there's anything like that going on in the mind, that's just a certain pattern that can come up. Just put a period on the end of the first sentence. I appreciate that I remember most things, period. I appreciate that I'm able to feel and experience some stillness during a practice, period. We don't have to have perfect stillness. Just notice what we do have. Let's focus on that for a moment. And then let's go a little bit more into the physical body and the breath. Set aside the inquiry for a moment. Notice what's happening now in your body and your breath, the energy as well. Take a few deeper breaths. And as you do, notice what that feels like in your body. And see if you can cultivate some appreciation for your respiratory system, the heart and the lungs, the way the body continues to breathe. And often when we tune in to our experience with our breath and we notice that we're holding our breath or we have a tight, kind of a held quality to the breath, just noticing that our bodies release the tension. We stop holding our breath. We start to breathe in that more continuous, relaxing way. And right now, focus on your breath. Notice at the end of the exhalation that everything softens. And notice that aliveness that comes in as you breathe in, especially a nice deep inhale. Take a few moments and really connect with your breath and with your appreciation for your breath and how your body breathes. And notice how the muscles of our body are responsive when we relax. When we tune in to the feeling of support for our body, for instance, we can really let ourselves settle back into the chair or onto the floor. Even if we have a pattern of holding tightness through the back of our body, when we notice that that's happening, and when we notice that actually we don't need to do that, we have support, our body's so happy to go along. We exhale and it softens. And if we look at this from that perspective again of the witness, does it feel like our body is tight to punish us? That there's some kind of a war going on between our muscles and the rest of our body? Sometimes we have kind of an automatic assignment of blame to the parts that hurt. Just notice if that's relevant at all in your experience. It might not be, it might be. And if it's not, see if that shifts things a bit. My body is actually just tightening up in response to experience, and it might be experience that's been happening for 50 years. Once it got tight, it didn't really know how to settle down and relax again. And sometimes when I tune in, it really gets soft and delicious in the body. Everything's smooth and nothing hurts so much. Other times that tension creeps back in and I have to keep relaxing over and over. But each time that we do it, we're giving that signal to our body that it's okay to relax. We don't need to be on guard. We don't need to be ready to jump. So let's take a moment to really appreciate our body and its capacity. It really does its best to keep us safe, to keep everything working. And the conditions often aren't optimal for our bodies. We're just giving our bodies some appreciation and seeing if there's anything that we've been blaming them for that perhaps we could take a step back and look and see if that's something we want to continue, we need to continue it. If it's reasonable, or maybe it's some carryover from the past that we could let go of. We understand a little bit about brain, the biology of the brain, and that the brain develops, especially in children, develops according to the experiences that we have. So if we grew up feeling protected and loved and safe, our brain's neural pathways develop with that capacity. We have a lot more activity in the brain that trends towards safety then. We're not as socially anxious. We can meet other people assuming that they're going to be on our side or neutral at least. Whereas if we've been hurt a lot, the positive brain development doesn't happen. And what happens instead is we develop this propensity to be scared around other people. We know that they can hurt us. And so our brains react very appropriately to that. It's always based on our own experience. And it doesn't mean that we're doomed if we have experiences earlier in life to have that go on forever, because we can change the brain. And the body's kind of the same. So, whatever it is that's going on in our body, some of it's genetics, of course, and some of it's just the experiences that have happened to the body. So, if there's been a lot of anxiety, the nervous system's going to be affected by that. If there's been drug addiction, the nervous system and the cells, the tissues of the body will be affected by that. Same as if there was smoking. I smoked until I was 25. That's a long time ago now. There's probably not a lot of residual damage from that. But all of these things that happen in and to our bodies are what creates the conditions that we're in right now. And some of those things we might shame ourselves for. Eating too much and having too much fat on the body is one that's very common. And that's something I've really worked with to really understand and accept whatever it is that's been happening. At the time, I felt that that was my best option, to use food for comfort. And now that I don't need it so much, my relationship with food is very different. And I still have an impact of that on my body. So, looking at all of these complex interplays of our mind, our brain, other people, our emotional life, and our body, just notice what comes up around that. Keep some awareness of your breath. Allow your body to relax. And let's give that a couple of minutes. Let's give it some space. See what comes forward. And see if you can cultivate some positive regard for your body, for how it functions. These bodies are where we live. It's all one. And let anything that's hesitant or negative move to the side for a bit. Let's take a few minutes to really appreciate our body. And at this moment, we're not entertaining buts, negative comments, any kind of limitations. We're just noticing what we could appreciate about our body. And then let that drop away as well. Focus again on your physical body, your breath and energy. Let yourself rest. Let your mind come to a bit more stillness. Let all the thinking move to the background. Notice your breath. Let your awareness, your attention on your breath really stabilize. Let your mind focus on that. And I'm going to say some phrases and just see what comes to mind. Do a minute or so in between each one. I appreciate about myself. And then fill in the blank. I appreciate this about myself. And put the period on the sentence. We're not looking for rebuttals or both sides of the story. We're just naming what's one thing that we appreciate about ourselves. And then see if someone else comes to mind that you appreciate for the same thing. If you were appreciating your generosity, for instance, see if someone else comes to mind that you feel has that same quality in whatever degree. Bring their image to mind. Send them some appreciation just in your heart. I appreciate this person for this. And then think of something else. What is something else that you appreciate about yourself? And complete that sentence. I appreciate myself for. And have a look at the evidence for that. For sure, you would have examples of you being that way or doing that thing, whatever the quality is that you appreciate. Really look at the pictures, notice who's in them, if anyone. How is it that that comes up? Maybe it's mostly the words. Really focus in on that for a moment. And then bring to mind somebody else who has that same quality that you appreciate in yourself. Really focus in on them and use as many of your senses as you can, your sight, your visual memory, the memory of touch and aroma, warmth, whatever it is. Specific memories that come up. And just for a moment, notice if there's any qualifiers on the other person. Again, if you were working with generosity, if you're thinking, I really appreciate how generous she is with her time. And notice if you have any buts that come along when you're looking at someone else, perhaps the same ones that you apply to yourself. See if they apply to this other person too. We're just noticing our experience. We're seeing how we work differently with ourselves and with others. And then let that line of inquiry come to a close as well. Tune back in directly to your body and your breath, the energy in your body, the muscles. Take a few deeper breaths. As you breathe out, let yourself really settle and complete your exhalation. And then there's room for a deeper inhalation. And make it a little bit of an exaggerated inhalation. Really bring a lot of new energy and breath in. And then let the exhalation continue 2 or 3 seconds if you can without straining. Extra, more than what you would have normally after a relaxed out breath. Breathe in deeply enough that you can feel the sides of the rib cage expanding. You have lots of air, then begin that smooth, effortless exhale. And then let the breath come back to normal. And reflect back on anything you might have noticed that you'd like to come back to. Either make a note or make a mental note. Maybe it's something that you can see is something you're holding on to that you might be willing now or able now to let go of. Something you weren't aware of, perhaps. Or maybe it's that sticky thing that you're always working with. Just notice for a couple of minutes. Review the whole practice right from the start. What is it you want to take forward to assimilate into the future? And then we're going to move into a sitting practice of alternate nostril breathing. It's also known as joyful breathing. That seems appropriate. But if you're on your back or if you're lying on the floor, give yourself 2 or 3 minutes to make a gradual transition. So start with turning over onto your left side. Support your head, bend your knees so that you're comfortable for quite a few breaths, just lying on your left side. And take your time as you come up to sitting. Notice the flow of energy, the flow of your breath, and tend with your mind that those will become equal. They often become more subtle as time goes on, and we just continue to notice that flow of attention, of awareness with the breath, eyebrow center to the base of the nose, and back to the eyebrow center on the inhale. Let yourself really focus on the smooth, effortless qualities of the breath. And then shift your attention a little bit away from the physical breath and just onto that flow of energy between the eyebrow center and the base of the nose, as though your breath is moving through a central channel, thin stream of awareness and energy flowing down on the exhale and back up on the inhale. Eyebrow center to the base of the nose. Inhale back to the eyebrow center. This is the Sushumna channel, the central channel, where the energy in our breath is equally balanced from side to side. Allow yourself to rest there, to observe that flow of energy and breath. Let the arms and shoulders be relaxed and at rest. Lots of length through the whole spine, the back, the neck, the shoulders. And most of your attention just on this flow of energy and breath, eyebrow center to the base of the nose and back. And what we notice with time is that that becomes more subtle. There's more of a quiet to the feel of it, to the sound of the so hum. Stay with that. Let yourself rest in that silence, in that stillness. If you notice that thoughts are starting to absorb your attention, or if you've got some kind of stiffness in your body or something like that, just focus again on straightening up. Give yourself room to breathe. Relax your shoulders, relax your whole body. And then refocus again on that movement of awareness and energy, right in that central channel between the eyebrow center and the base of the nose, allowing your breath and awareness to flow. Inhaling so, exhaling hum. and working with what is, appreciating what is. Allow this focus, this practice to take you into silence and rest there. And for a few minutes, let's come back to the practice of appreciating. Notice our experience right now. And let yourself pay attention to what it is that was positive, what you might have learned about yourself, what you appreciated about the practice, or just being able to rest with some of that, perhaps in a different way. It's such a gift to give ourselves this time. And sometimes, too, when we do a practice of something like alternate nostril breathing, we remember how much we really like it and how calming it feels when we do the practice. And sometimes we might get inspired to make that more part of our routine again. So we'll take our break now and see you back in 15 minutes.